Cool. Do we want to, so I guess the question is, how do we want to proceed in this call? We've just gotten the 1.3 release out. Congratulations to everyone. That actually went relatively smoothly. I think the only sort of hiccups we had along the way were basically things that came in, reports that came into our hands late, and we got those fixed very quickly. So I think that went very well. And I think we're in the process of sort of lining up things for the next release. We have some, you're doing some finishing touches on some of the VL3 stuff around DNS, Denise, if I understand correctly. Artem, you're working on the monolith, breaking up the monolith use case, correct?
Yep.
And we've been, I think, having a healthy dialogue about that in the issue. And then I know that we've got other folks who've been looking at running a service mesh on top of a VL3. And I know that Denise has been, pinging me with some questions there, and I provided some pointers. So what's the most productive use for folks at this meeting? Do we want to sort of dig into issues and PRs directly here?
We can discuss just NSM issues and PRs, and we can discuss offline about service mesh integrations.
Whatever is most useful for folks is fine with me. As I think I said already on the Slack channel, feel free to ping me there. I also realized, Daniil, I am not always the easiest native speaker of English. So if it's easier to have conversations there in Slack channels, that's also fine. One thing I will point out is that if you @ me on Slack, it will come to my attention much more quickly than if you are trying to address me, you don't.
Yeah, it sounds good. So we are going to provide maybe not daily, but weekly statuses in Slack as we do for the core team. And by the way, we can also ask questions which we are blocked on and mention you in the Slack. So this way we can, yep.
And then I'm hoping to have some time this week to actually write down some of the thoughts I've had in this direction. Because I'm very familiar with the mechanics of at least how Istio is functioning, and I believe the rest of the service meshes are relatively similar. And then, particularly because one of the nice things about doing a service mesh on top of a VL3 with NetSM is you don't have to go through all the insane complexity of some of the multi-cluster gatewaying efforts that you've got going on in various application service meshes, which will make them extremely difficult. You can just run a single service mesh instance on top of the VL3.
That sounds super good, but as I can see for this moment, and as I know, some of service meshes are using Kubernetes API to resolve all available services.
So we actually had some folks at one point in the past who did an Istio plugin in order to allow us to inject things directly. I presume that mechanism is still available. I can actually reach out and ask some of the folks who did the first turn of that crank and see what they have to say on that. That might be of help.
Okay, can we look at our release sprint sheet?
Sure, if you could stick the link in the
chat.
Yep.
Oh, it's done.
Cool. Cool. So Artem, Is it possible?
Will you share the screen?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I should be sharing. Let me do that. Okay. So looking at the 1.4 tab. So Artem, could you explain the reasoning why you're providing a Docker Compose YAML instead of just something that can be run as a single line Docker image?
I think it's just for convenient, because I think it is a sort of Kubernetes YAML, and there we can declare the things like host network or environments, and I think if we use Docker Compose, it'd be much easier.
Okay, I mean, I know we can do all of that from the command line, right? From the command line, you can say privileged and host network when you're just running a Docker container. So, I mean, the thing I would suggest to you is let's try and keep things as simple as we can.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep. I mean, it may be that you actually do need Docker Compose for what you need to do. And I'm not very familiar with Docker Compose. It's not a tool that I've used much. I've used Docker a lot, and I've used Kubernetes a lot, but I've not actually used Docker Compose much. So maybe it is actually very simple, but I think we'd like to be able to give people like a single command line to run in order to enable their monolith.
Okay, got it.
So, all right, and we've been talking about the decomposition. The Spire Federation piece is going to be interesting. Registering on the floating registry shouldn't be that bad, I don't think. And we've been talking about what the change should look like, roughly.
Yep.
Any questions so far?
Also got questions related to should we implement a VL3 chain element for kernel?
So, go ahead.
We already started to talk about this issue.
Yeah, and so like let me sort of refresh my memory a little bit, because on the VL3 elements, if I recall correctly, we basically, for the mechanism chain elements for MemIF, if I recall, we provided an option. How are we deciding which VRF to plug a MemIF interface into currently?
We decided based on network service, as I remember.
Okay. Let me take a quick look and see. So looking at the attach function in VRF, you're loading the VRF ID. Okay, you're using software interface set table, correct?
Yep, I need to take a look.
The reason I'm sort of mentioning this is I'm not sure that we actually are going to need to write something in SDK kernel to connect a kernel interface to the VRF.
Probably you're right, but I saw your comments. I need to try your solution, but my thing is, could you please open this issue?
Oh, absolutely. Right.
Yep.
So you
in this diagram, yeah. So my thought was, anyway, we need to create L3 cross connect, and we need to create a WireGuard part.
Why are we doing the L3 cross connect? Is the thing I'm confused about.
Because we need one interface to communicate with K8s cluster, and the second interface for the monolith server.
Okay. So that's where I think there's a little bit of confusion, or at least a difference in how we're thinking about the problem. So go on with how you're thinking about the problem.
Could you please repeat the question?
Oh, so go on with how you're thinking about the problem. So we've got a server part where a WireGuard interface comes in. We've got a L3 cross connect to a client part, which is basically creating a tap interface into the monolith server. So the question I would have is, in this model, if I get more than one client connecting to the monolith server, do I wind up with more than one kernel interface in the monolith server?
I think if we use VL3 stuff, we need one interface for that. And I think we need to create VL3 stuff on the kernel side, because on the kernel side, on the host, we have an IP address, and so I think that in that point we need to create a VREF and loopback interface and so on. Okay, so
I can sort of tell you a little bit here, and I'll hopefully get a chance to draw you a picture shortly of what I was thinking. And so my thought was, instead of having an L3XC from between a server part and a client part, effectively you just set up the network service endpoint like you would set up a VL3 NSE. Except with a VL3 NSE, we typically right now are only supporting WireGuard as a mechanism. And here you would want to support, essentially to have, we're only supporting MEMIF in the VL3 currently. Here you'd essentially want a VL3 that supports, not MEMIF, but either WireGuard or kernel as a mechanism. And then you'd want to make sure to include the parts that you would need to make sure that you're correctly setting up, all the IP addresses and everything else. So at that point, then, if a WireGuard tunnel comes in, it just gets connected to the VL3. And so any number of WireGuard interfaces can come in, they get connected to the VRF for the VL3. So you connect them to the table of the VRF. But then in the command that you're actually running in the main, you just have one simple client call that you make that says, hey, by the way, I'd like a kernel interface client for this. So the result is that comes around, it makes a client call to exactly the server you just started with a local kernel mechanism. And the result is you end up creating a kernel client in the monolith server itself that is also connected to the VL3. Does that make sense?
Yep, got it. Thank you. I need to try this solution. Probably you're right.
I'm hoping it's relatively simple, but I don't know until we try it.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else on the monolith?
No, from my side.
Okay. Denise, we've been chatting back and forth about the K8s DNS.
Yep, currently it's in progress. At this moment, I started to write a spec document for NSM with all VL3 DNS use cases and all possible solutions. I saw your comments about adding something like our DNS stream for our goals. For example, something like client name, and that's service name, and something like this.
Yep. We could continue that discussion, because you think deeply about these things, and I'm not at all sure that what I'm suggesting is probably not as deeply thought as what you're thinking of. So we can definitely continue that conversation.
Yep. Currently, I see many corner cases and use cases where DNS part is super important for VL3. network. So currently I'm just creating a document with all cases. And that's all from my side.
Yep. So cool. So on the advanced healing stuff, I've seen some PRs going on with this, the condition healing on data path being down. I think we got in the pieces correct that are detecting, that are handling that one case that Artem found where we weren't properly cleaning up NetNSs. Is that correct?
Yeah, we already resolved all problems here. And as I know, all PRs and all pieces are ready to review.
Excellent.
So if you have a chance, please take a look at PRs. I also will take a look at them, and I guess it will be landed soon.
Excellent. All right. And then the VL3 healing cases.
Oh, currently we are not working with it. At this moment, we are working with problems that we found with example related to scale from 0 and VL3.
Okay.
There we found and problems that the example is working correctly for first run, but if we run a couple of tests, then VL3 scale from 0 example is going to be unstable. And we found that we have some problems with leaking of VRF tables and interfaces. It's mostly related to case when we have some expired endpoint in the registry. For example, we can get a situation when at first run we executed example with simple VL3, and after that, right after that, we can start example with scale from 0. And in this case, sometimes we can find in the registry VL3 endpoints from the previous test, and our VL3 endpoints are going to connect to all endpoints, to all VL3 endpoints, and something is going wrong.
Okay. Okay. No, just it'll take a little while to debug and figure it out.
Yeah, but currently Nikita is debugging it, and we also found a few.
Yeah, VRF table links are not good.
Yep.
I mean, well, what's ridiculous about them is they're not good. They're definitely not good. But on the other hand, network service, VPP is strong enough that you can literally run millions of VRF tables. So it's not good, but it's not as disastrous as it could be.
Yep. Currently, it somehow affects VPP, and after the leak, VPP can't create interface, a numbered interface, and
okay, that's not good.
And we are working with this issue.
Okay, so you're debugging that. All right, so that's good. We are now right up against the top of the hour here. Shall we, is there anything else before we call this, close this meeting out and move on to the community call?
I think, yep. Guys, do you have any questions? Okay, I think we can go to the next meeting.
Okay.